"Mr. Adams," the old lady shrieked, "you're embarking under very threatening signs. The heavens frown, the clouds roll, the winds howl, the waves of the sea roar upon the beach." 10-year-old John Quincy Adams looked up at his father, who nodded to the lady, smiled and excused himself, then whispered reassurances in his son's ear. The woman was a good lady, and Adams with very delicate health, much afflicted with hysterical complaints, often a little disarranged in her imagination. With that, father, son, and their servant boarded the barge and bounded over the angry waters toward the 24-gun frigate Boston that waited in the bay to take them across the Atlantic to France. All but echoing the lady's warning, the waves lapped the sides of the barge, slapping passenger faces, stinging John Quincy's eyes with salty spray, and filling him with fear of impending disaster at sea. Several days later, the captain of the Boston confirmed the boy's fear, shouting to crewmen and pointing to the horizon. 3 British Navy frigates had climbed into view. Heeling over with sails full, the Boston fled and lost sight of 2 ships. But the 3rd stayed in sight, pursuing the entire day, night, and all the next day, intent on capturing the American ship and its famous passenger. "Our powder, cartridges, and balls were placed by the guns," John Adams recalled, "and everything made ready to begin the action. As night fell, the enemy was gaining on us very fast, and John Quincy knew that if the British captured them, his father faced summary hanging from the yardarm, while the boy himself faced impressment and a life of servitude in the British Navy. Nightfall only added to their danger as winds picked up and swelled into a hurricane. The Adamses went below to their cabin, where it was with the utmost difficulty that my little son and I could hold ourselves in bed with both our hands, bracing ourselves with our feet. Then a sudden and tremendous report rocked the ship. Adams and his boy had no way of knowing whether the British frigate had overtaken us and fired on us, or whether our guns had been discharged. As they waited for the sea to smash through the door and rush into their cabin, John Adams held his frightened little son in his arms, but said nothing, as the last-minute thoughts and regrets of every man facing death raced through his head. Of all his regrets, he rued his decision to take his boy on the Atlantic crossing, a foolhardy decision for an adult, let alone a child in midwinter. But Adams and his son had been apart for nearly 2 years. John Quincy needed paternal attention, and John Adams missed the joys of nurturing his oldest son. On learning he would have to go to France, he thought the trip a perfect opportunity for the two to grow close again, and to expose Johnny to the glories of French and European culture, with their history, art, music, architecture, and languages. The American Revolution had deprived the boy of most educational and cultural advantages, not to mention his father's attention. Now the boy and his father faced death together at sea, in each other's arms. John Quincy Adams had been born a decade earlier, when the first seeds of the Revolution were sprouting. Periodic riots erupted in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and other American towns. Britain's Parliament had raised taxes on goods shipped to the colonies. Then it shredded the Magna Carta and ordered admiralty courts in Canada to try American smugglers without juries of their peers. And this sequence of events, John Quincy explained, was to affect the fortunes of no single individual more than those of the infant then lying in his cradle in the little village of Braintree in the Massachusetts Bay. That infant was the second child and first son of John and Abigail Adams of Braintree, Massachusetts, a farming community about 6 miles south of Boston, later renamed Quincy. At birth, John Quincy was the most recent in a long line of illustrious forebears who helped shape the destiny of the English-speaking world. The first recorded Quincy sailed with William the Conqueror across the English Channel from Normandy in 1066 to crush English forces at Hastings. A century and a half later, in 1215, Sieur de Quincy, Earl of Winchester, rode to Runnymede and helped force King John to sign the Magna Carta, which guaranteed English freemen the right to trial by a jury of their peers.